After a long journey through the wilds of Iliac Bay, you decide to stop in at a small town. You explore this town, eventually coming across a temple, which you decide to enter. After walking around the temple, you realize it is a temple of Stendarr. You decide to speak to one of its members, who offers for you to join. Hello and welcome to Anatomy of Fiction. In today's video, we will be discussing Stendarr. More specifically, why would anyone choose to worship Stendarr, and why you may want to in your next playthrough. To do this, we must go over several things. Firstly, who even is Stendarr? So, some of the mythology surrounding Stendarr, what he is known as, and what he is known for. After this, we will move on to the cults or factions of Stendarr and what they do, when they were active, and any of their beliefs. Then we will move on to who worships Stendarr, so the regular followers of Stendarr throughout the provinces and races of Tamriel, what they associate Stendarr with, what they believe, and how do they worship Stendarr. After this, we will discuss the creations of Stendarr, so these being the various artifacts associated with Stendarr along with their history. So let us begin with who is Stendarr. So Stendarr is an Aedra who is considered to be part of the 9 divines. The Aedra are one of the 2 groups who are said to have participated in the creation of Mundus, so the plane of existence that Tamriel and the rest of Nian sits on. The 9 divines contains 8 of the most active in this creation and Talos. Stendarr is believed to be the god of mercy, charity, and well-earned luck for some. For others, Stendarr is described as the god of justice. Stendarr is viewed as the patron of the Imperial Legion. Along with this, he is also considered the patron of magistrates, rulers, and knights errant. This potentially being due to him being viewed as the deity of compassion or righteous rule. We also see Stendarr described as being the apologist of men, but this does not tell us much about his mythological origins. If we look at one of the myths surrounding Stendarr's origins, along with the origins of the others, we can get an idea of what he is to the people of Tamriel. So, this being through the Anuard. The Anuard is a version of the creation myth from the Mythic era. So, in the Anuard, the origins of Stendarr is that through the mingling of the blood of Anu and Padme, as this was the origins for the Aedra. The story of this goes that Anu and Padme were brothers, and when they came into the void, this is when time would begin. As they would wander the void, the light and the darkness would create something new. This would be Nier. Now, Anu and Padme would both fall for Nier. However, she would only love one of the brothers, this being Anu. So Padme, bitter about this, would retreat, disappearing. Eventually, Nier would become pregnant and Padme would return. With this return, Padme would confess to Nier that he loved her. However, Nier did not feel the same way and would tell Padme that she only loved Anu. This would anger Padme and he would beat Nier. Anu would return, he would fight Padme, Anu would cast Padme outside of time. Nier would then give birth to creation. However, she would soon pass away from her injuries. Anu, in his grieving state, would hide in the sun and sleep. As time would pass, the 12 worlds of creation would flourish, with life springing up on these worlds. Eventually, after much time had passed, Padme was finally able to return to time. With Padme's return to time, he would see creation and he would hate it. Padme would raise his sword and swing it, shattering the 12 worlds and their alignment. Anu would awake and once again would fight Padme. The battle between the brothers would be long and furious, with Anu eventually being victorious against Padme. Anu would cast aside the body of Padme, as Anu believed that his brother was dead. Anu would then attempt to save creation, doing so by taking the remains of the 12 worlds and forming them into one, this becoming Nian. However, with Anu being distracted, Padme would see an opportunity. Padme would strike him through the chest. Anu would then pull his brother outside of time forever. So from the blood left over from the battle, new creations would spring forth. From the blood solely of Padme would come the Deities, thus leading to their evilness. From the blood solely of Anu, we would see the stars born, and with the mixed blood of Anu and Padme, we would see the creation of the Aedra. One of these Aedra being Stendarr. This mingling of the blood gave the Aedra the ability to be both good and evil, along with their connection to worldly affairs. Most of the other origin stories are somewhat similar to this, with minor variations in what caused the actual creations of the Aedra and Deities, but all centering on the cultural version of Anu and Padme. So, based on who Stendarr is, why do people worship Stendarr? Well, Stendarr is considered to be the god of mercy and compassion, so for those who are down on their luck, they may seek out Stendarr as a way of gaining assistance, as Stendarr guides those who worship him to seek out those who are sick or down on their luck and provide them with kindness. This would encourage those who have been in the darkest of places and experience the mercy and compassion that those who worship Stendarr provide to do the same to others, essentially encouraging new worshippers to form. We also see with Stendarr being the patron of rulers and magistrates, he may encourage those in these positions to create fairer laws as rulers and look to the side of justice when it comes to dealing with crime and criminals. But this only tells us part of the story. To learn more about why someone may want to worship Stendarr, we should discuss the cults of Stendarr. When it comes to the cults of Stendarr, there are a few. These are more militant than the normal worshippers of Stendarr. For this, we should start with the Crusaders of Stendarr, also known as the Knights of Stendarr. Now, this group was associated with the Temple of Stendarr, being considered the sort of knight or militant arm of the church. This group is considered to be the sort of enforcers of Stendarr's will. With this, we see the Crusaders being present with the temple, and on occasion being sent where they believe trouble is brewing. An example of this occurs in the Second Era in the year 582. Now, in this year, the Crusaders would send Crusader Dalamar to Craglorn in Hammerfell. There, he would investigate the strange rumors swirling around the ruined city of Skyreach, which, as it turned out, the legends and myths about this strange ruined city would be true. It was filled with dark magic. The Crusaders would take this as their sign to spring into action and attempt to control the site known as Skyreach Catacombs, where much of the issues seemed to be coming from, as there had been a slight issue with necromancy. As it turns out, this catacombs had been the prison for the Lich Virmarel, the Betrayer. Now, Crusader Dalamar would realize the seriousness of this issue and the difficulty of the problem at hand. With this, he would request the help of some adventurers, ensuring that this problem would actually be taken care of. The adventurers would assist Dalamar in taking care of the issue within Skyreach Catacombs. However, even with Virmaril being defeated, Dalamar would decide to stay behind in case any other troubles were to spring up in the site in the future. Moving on to the Third Era, which is when the Crusaders could be found throughout much of the Iliac Bay region, primarily in the areas where the temples of Stendarr are found. Here, they would be known for doing a variety of tasks like performing exorcisms, finding missing scholars, and even helping in the healing of the sick through their questing. These kind of tasks often occurring in the Third Era around the year 405. However, after this, little would be heard about the Crusaders. But there would be another group devoted to Stendarr that would spring up, this being the Vigil of Stendarr. Those who make up its ranks are referred to as the Vigilants of Stendarr. This group are considered to be a sort of warrior priests of Stendarr. Each chapter of the Vigilants are led by a keeper of the vigil. Now, with the Vigilants, they primarily target Daedra and Daedra worshippers. They do not go after vampires as much, as they don't view them to be as big of a threat as that of the Daedra and their worshippers. However, they still view them as abominations and do not believe in the cure for vampirism. Unlike the other groups, the Vigilants are not the most merciful, with those they view as abominations, this even extending to those who worship Daedra. With the Vigil of Stendarr being more focused on Daedra and their worshippers, it has caused splinter groups like that of the Dawn Guard to arise, which was actually a reformation of an earlier faction. So the Dawn Guard in this era believed that the Vigil of Stendarr as a group were too soft and not prepared for any real threats. The Vigil of Stendarr were established not long after the Oblivion Crisis, this crisis occurring in the Third Era in the year 433. The idea behind their establishment, of course, being to hunt down the threat of Aedra. The Vigil of Stendarr, however, in the year 201 in the 4th era are not the powerhouse that they used to be. This being due to the Volk-Ihar clan of vampires attacking the Vigilants. This attack would destroy the Hall of the Vigilant. Now, this was no random attack, instead it would be spurned by one of the Vigilants, brother Adalvold, as he was researching vampiric ruins and artifacts. Adalvold had found Dim Hollow Crypt, which he believed contained a long-lost vampiric artifact. Because of this, most of the Vigilants would be killed, and one of the few remaining, this being Vigilant Tolan, would contact the Dawn Guard asking for their help. Tolan would end up going alone to Dim Hollow Crypt, where the last Dragonborn would find him dead after fighting with vampires. After making their way through the crypt, killing off the various vampires and the other dwellers, the last Dragonborn would find Adalvold alive, being interrogated by a vampire by the name of Lokil. However, Adalvold would not last long in the interrogation, eventually passing away. The last Dragonborn would manage to kill Lokil, and would go on to search for the mysterious vampiric treasure hidden in the crypt. However, this treasure would be no gold. Instead, the last Dragonborn would find a mysterious woman who had an Elder Scroll. As it would turn out, this woman had been imprisoned there for around 4,200 years, with the discovery of Adalvold setting off the vampires trying to find her before the Vigilants or anyone else did. So the Vigilants in this case were attacked, and their numbers heavily reduced by the vampires due to the curiosity of one. But anyway, the Vigil of Stendarr as a group believed in eliminating the threat that the perceived abominations posed. Whether that be Aedra and Aedra worshippers, which were their main focus, or with the splinter group, the Dawn Guard, they were more focused on any and all of the so-called abominations or threats like vampires. This group did not believe in giving mercy like Stendarr promoted. So, based on the cult of Stendarr, why would anyone choose to worship Stendarr? Well, with the cult of Stendarr, there is the main overarching theme of getting rid of the darkness within Tamriel. With the Vigil of Stendarr believing that getting rid of darkness is not done through mercy, but through the destruction of creatures that are viewed as abominations. Whilst the Crusaders of Stendarr still do provide mercy and assistance to those in need as their way of getting rid of darkness, along with defeating the dark creatures. So these groups both provided a way for those who may have been affected by the darkness lurking throughout Tamriel to feel as though they are resolving the issue they see. The Crusaders through both killing monsters and providing mercy, and the Vigilance by destroying what they see as abominations. But this is only one piece of the puzzle. To learn more about why someone may choose to worship Stendarr, we should discuss his regular worshippers throughout Tamriel. When it comes to the followers of Stendarr, you can find people who worship this divine throughout Tamriel, but he is most specifically seen in the pantheons of the Altmer, Bosmer, Bretons, Imperials, and the Khajiit. Now, with this, each of these groups have their own stories, beliefs, and practices when it comes to Stendarr. For this, we should start with the Altmer. The Altmer have their own groups dedicated to the worship of Stendarr. A great example of this is the sect of Harmonious Masters, who are in Lilandril over in the Somerset Isles. This sect was dedicated to the teachings of Stendarr. Emerging in the Second Era, the Harmonious Masters frowned upon violence, instead turning to spreading Stendarr's glowing gifts of healing, along with spreading their knowledge of healing and cleansing rituals throughout the general population. This group being rather different than some of the other groups, like the Crusaders and the Vigilants, as they do not approve of any form of violence, being a peaceful group instead. But the worship of Stendarr throughout the Altmer is not the most widespread, as there was a minority of elves at this time who did not approve of the worship of Stendarr. This being due to Stendarr being viewed as the apologist of men. However, those within the sect of Harmonious Masters disagreed with this criticism, claiming that Stendarr loves, cherishes, and protects all mortals. With this belief, this sect adapted the magic of Stendarr's light into healing spells, which could be used by anyone for anyone, as they believed that Stendarr's love and mercy was all-inclusive. Now, with the Bosmer worship of Stendarr, there is not much known, as although he is one of the 8 divines in their pantheon, he is not the main god worshipped. To the Bosmer, he is considered to be the god of compassion and righteousness. However, also to the Bosmer, he is viewed as the apologist of men, so he is not the most popular. But anyway, moving on to the Bretons, who we know more about. When it comes to the religious beliefs of the Bretons, their beliefs in the origins of the world are rather similar with what some describe, knowing their original beings as light and dark. Other names like order and chaos can also be used for these forces. But what they are called is not what matters. Instead, the fact they are opposites is what matters. With these two forces having the constant struggle and fight, they cause energetic distortions, and this is what causes life to spring up in the belief of the Breton. So with this, the Daedra are reflections of the dark, and the Aedra are a reflection of the light. Now, the Bretons were not always worshippers of the 8 divines, with them originally having similar religious practices to their Aldmer and Nadic ancestors, so the worship of deities like Hyacine and Sheol. But with the rise of the Alessian Empire, the Bretons were forced to change from what was viewed as Daedric worship to the worship of the 8 divines. This worship, of course, including the worship of Stendarr, this being the mainstream religion of the Bretons now, with temples of Stendarr being found throughout the Iliac Bay region, along with several statues featuring Stendarr's imagery. The Temple of Stendarr in the Iliac Bay region offers training and healing as part of their worship of Stendarr, due to them being dedicated to his teachings. Now, when it comes to the Imperials, they have their own beliefs and myths when it comes to Stendarr, like that of their creation myth that is known as Shezar's Song. With Shezar's Song, it is said that Shezarr had convinced the other Aedra to become mothers and fathers to creation. This would lead to the Aedra to give birth to the world, the beasts and the beings, making these things from parts of themselves. Now, this process was not without problem, with the Aedra who had participated losing their youth, and their strength not being as powerful as they once were. Now, many of the Aedra who had participated felt bitter and tricked. They felt like they had been lied to by Shezarr. They were angry with Shezarr and disgusted with their weakened selves. These were the gods of the elves, led by Auriel, who believed that they must teach the elves to suffer the pain of existence nobly. Other Aedra, however, did not feel the same way, and instead were pleased with the result of creation. These were the gods of men, led by Akatosh. They instead cherished their creation, believing that they must teach the men and the beast folk to live well, and to cherish beauty and honor, and to love one another. However, this would not be the end. In fact, there would be the Daedra lords mocking of Shezarr and the other Aedra. They would tell them, "Cut parts of ourselves off and lose them forever? That's stupid. You'll be sorry. We are far smarter than you, for we will create a new world out of ourselves, but we will not cut it off or let it mock us, but we will make this world within ourselves, forever ours and under our control." And this is how the Daedric realms would be created. However, with this, the Daedric princes still did envy the mortal realm of the Aedra's creation, which is why they manipulate and steal away the most ambitious of the mortals, continuing their teasing and mocking of Shezarr and the other Aedra. "Not only are you fools to mutilate yourselves," gloat the Daedra lords, "but you cannot even keep the best pieces," which prefer the glory and power of the Daedra lords to the feeble vulgarity of the mush-minded Aedra. So in this story, we see that the creation of the mortals comes from Stendarr's influence. There is no specific mention as to what caused the Aedra to exist, but the aftermath of their existence is creation, which is different to the Aeoliad myth known as the Anuad, which, as we discussed before, the creation was caused by Anu, Nir, and Padme. So in the imperial perspective, Stendarr is much more important in the creation story. We also see that Stendarr had importance in their worship as part of the 9 divines, with various chapels being created in honor of Stendarr in various places, like that of the Chapel of Stendarr located in Coral. Now, with the Khajiit, we should talk about their creation myth, which is slightly different, considering that all of the main characters are, well, cats, or god cats. Now, this story goes that there were originally 2 entities, this being Anu and Fadomai. With the passing of time, they would eventually decide to marry and have children. In this first litter, they would give birth to 5 god cats: Alkosh, Kanathi, Magris, Mara, and Srendarr. Stendarr would be described as the runt, with Anur telling Stendarr, "Stendarr, we give you mercy, for how does a runt survive except by mercy?" There is more to the story of the origins of the god cats, however, Stendarr's involvement ends there, being viewed as the runt of the first litter and the god of mercy and Khajiit myth. Now, even with the differences in these races, the Temple of Stendarr does have teachings that are found throughout Tamriel in its temple walls. We see some of these teachings in the precepts of Stendarr, which teach the followers of Stendarr how to behave. These precepts are: never refuse aid you are capable of providing. Go among the infirm and the wounded wherever you find them. Offer prayer to Stendarr every day. Do not hoard wealth or indulge physically. So with these precepts of Stendarr, he encourages kindness to those around you, helping those you are able. So based on who worships Stendarr, why would anyone choose to worship him? If we look at the Harmonious Masters sect, now this group is unlike many of the other groups. They are instead a pacifist group. They also claim that although Stendarr is viewed as the apologist of man, he loves all creatures of creation equally, whether they be man, mer, or even beast folk. They attempt to embody the message of mercy by providing teaching and healing to all. Along with this, if we look at the Khajiit, Stendarr is associated with mercy. This being due to his status as the runt of the litter, so he provides compassion, charity, and justice to those who are in need in the eyes of the Khajiit. So with the main message that rings through the races of Tamriel, Stendarr as a god provides mercy and compassion to those who worship him. He encourages and inspires those who worship him to be the kind of light that they wish to see in the world, especially in the groups like the Harmonious Masters who are pacifists. But this is only one piece of the puzzle. To learn more about why someone may choose to worship Stendarr, we should discuss the creations of Stendarr. When it comes to the creations of Stendarr, there are several. However, the artifacts associated with Stendarr are potentially the most interesting. So for the artifacts of Stendarr, we should begin with the gauntlets of the Crusader. These gauntlets are part of the Crusader relics, which were a set of armor and weapons created by the divines for Pellinol White Strake, who is often known as the Divine Crusader. Now, this set was created for Pellinol to aid him in his battle against Umoril, the Unfeathered, who was an Ayleid sorcerer king. Stendarr's contribution to this was the gauntlets of the Crusader, which would have been given to Pellinol around the year 243 in the First Era, as this is when the battle against Umoril occurred. In this battle, Pellinol would be successful in slaying Umoril. However, Umoril would also land a fatal blow on Pellinol, killing the Divine Crusader. The gauntlets of the Crusader would be lost for centuries, this being until the formation of the Knights of the Nine. Now, the Knights of the Nine would be founded in the Third Era in the year 111 by Sir Amiel Lannis. Soon after this, the Knights of the Nine would manage to recover the entire set of the Crusader relics. This of course includes the gauntlets of the Crusader. But with the arrival of the War of the Red Diamond in the year 121 in the Third Era, this knightly order would not last long. With this war, some of the knights would leave the order, joining different sides of the civil war. The Knights of the Nine would officially dissolve in the year 131 in the Third Era. Now, when it comes to the fate of the gauntlets, after the Knights of the Nine would break up, they would remain with Sir Casimir for a time, this being until the year 139 in the Third Era. Sir Casimir, who had been changed by the war, no longer feeling sympathy or pity for the weak like Stendarr encouraged. So in the year 139, Sir Casimir would lose his patience at a beggar who had asked him for assistance at a temple of Stendarr. Sir Casimir would strike the beggar, killing the beggar accidentally. This would lead to two things. Firstly, Stendarr cursing the entire family line of Casimir for this act, and secondly, the gauntlets falling off Casimir's hands, laying on the floor of the Coral Chapel, being too heavy for anyone to pick up. Now this would be until the hero of Kvatch would travel to the Coral Chapel in the Third Era in the year 433. So, the hero of Kvatch in this year would encounter Kellen, who was a descendant of Sir Casimir, and would find out that the curse had actually continued to affect his bloodline. Now the hero of Kvatch would attempt to cure the curse of Kellen, asking one of the priests by the name of Aedra about a cure. Here, the hero of Kvatch would find out that to cure Kellen, they must take on the curse themselves, showing the mercy that Stendarr encourages. In learning this, the hero of Kvatch would also learn that the priest Aedra had not been the most merciful, nor had he followed the precepts of Stendarr, specifically breaking the precept that says, "Never refuse aid you are capable of providing." Aedra knew how to lift the curse. He was able to lift the curse. The only thing stopping him from lifting the curse was his own fear. But fear is no reason to refuse assistance when generations of that family had suffered without mercy, especially when it is something that you, as a priest, had signed up to do. So the hero of Kvatch would take on the burden and cure Kellen of the curse by providing mercy to the descendant of Sir Casimir. And this would also provide the hero of Kvatch with the ability to pick up the gauntlets. Now the gauntlets of the Crusader provide the ability of merciful touch. This power allows the wearer to restore health. It also provides resistance to disease. Now this is not the only artifact related to Stendarr. There is also Stendarr's hammer. Stendarr's hammer was rumored to have actually been wielded by the god of justice himself. Not much is known about the history of this hammer, however it was first documented in Tarasa Aram's museum over in Mournhold, claimed to be one of the first items in the display. But it was not an easy item to display, apparently being so heavy that it would take 4 men to lift it onto the display podium, meaning that most people would not be able to wield this hammer in battle. This hammer was found there as late as the year 427 in the Third Era. It was said to have the ability to drain or damage the health of those it strikes. However, it does drain the stamina of those who wield it. I guess that can be due to the weight. Now there is also another legendary artifact that is said to be associated with Stendarr, this being the set of armor known as the Widow Will. Now the story behind this set is that there was a soldier's widow who lived in a rather poor village. However, the villagers and the widow would all live rather peaceful and quiet lives. This being until a group of necromancers would set up camp nearby. Now this group of necromancers were not exactly the most friendly towards the village. They would begin robbing the graves of the deceased members and kidnapping the living members in the night. However, there was little the village could do to stop the necromancers. The village had no fighters and no mercenaries. The village was also too poor to send for outside help. So the brave widow would do the unthinkable. She would put on her husband's old suit of armor, which did not fit her very well, and she would pick up his sword. She was determined to drive the necromancers away from her village. This selfless act would not go unnoticed. In fact, Stendarr himself would notice the widow's brave actions. He would bless the armor the widow wore with holy protections, these Stendarran protections being so powerful that it would cause the necromancers who attacked her to turn to dust. And this would be the myth of the armor known as Widow Will. So based on the artifacts of Stendarr, why would anyone choose to worship Stendarr? Well, if we take a look at the Widow Will, Stendarr turned an old, worn-out set of armor that was poorly fitting into one of the most powerful sets of armor known to both man and mer. This being due to Stendarr recognizing the selflessness and bravery of a regular person. The idea that Stendarr could provide a blessing this powerful to aid those who worship him would be rather inspiring of worship, especially when you come to a time of need like the widow and her village. And if we look at the gauntlets, although the curse had been placed upon Sir Casimir's family, his descendant Kellen would return all those years later, hoping that he could gain the mercy of Stendarr. However, it was actually one of the priests of Stendarr preventing this from occurring. These gauntlets, although they caused the death of a beggar, were also incredibly powerful objects of healing and protection. So with the armor and weapons that Stendarr provides, they are powerful artifacts that are able to protect and help those who wield them, as long as they are done so correctly and mercifully. So based on who Stendarr is, his cult, along with his regular worshippers, and the artifacts associated with him, we can finally answer the question, why would anyone choose to worship Stendarr? Well, Stendarr seems like an overly positive deity considering that he is the god of mercy, the god of compassion, the god of justice. However, the same cannot be said with all of those who follow him and the groups that are created in his honor. A great example of this is the Vigil of Stendarr, who make their stance clear on mercy in one of their own lines, this being, Stendarr's mercy be upon you, for the Vigil has none to spare, hinting that they do not exactly follow the merciful path that Stendarr is known for, with the Vigilants even being recorded as having tortured people to death for information. We also see the lack of mercy in less violent ways, this being in the Third Era in the year 433, with Araldor, who refused to cure Kellen as Araldor was too afraid. Araldor could not provide the mercy that those who are priests of Stendarr are supposed to provide. So not all worshippers of Stendarr follow the mercifulness of this god. However, with Stendarr being seen as a merciful being, there are many that are attracted to the kindness attribute and the peaceful way of life that the worship of Stendarr could potentially provide. We see this with the sect of Harmonious Masters. This group were in their time pacifists, who viewed everyone as equal. They shared knowledge and they provided healing to those in need, which is what the teachings of Stendarr promotes. Never refuse aid you are capable of providing, so heal those if you are capable of doing so. This group provided what Araldor could not do centuries later, but this is not the only reason why someone may choose to follow him, as those who manage to get a hold of his artifacts and have the ability to wield them are provided with much power. So those who follow Stendarr follow him for a variety of reasons. These being due to the mercy that Stendarr provides through kindness and charity, but also through his assistance in healing and in battle. Others may follow him due to his righteousness and justice, desiring to make the decisions that are fair and just to their people. Some may even follow him as a god of well-earned luck, when the other god of luck, Sai, isn't feeling as giving. So, you may choose to worship Stendarr on your next playthrough if you are down on your luck, needing compassion and mercy from others to get back on your feet. Or you may also choose to worship him if you feel the desire to right what you believe to have been wronged, joining up with the Vigilants to rid Tamriel of the abominations, or joining the Crusaders to enforce the will of Stendarr, being the compassionate blade when a situation demands. Or you could even also desire to be the helping hand, providing healing and compassion to those in need. So let me know in the comments, would you worship Stendarr? A special thank you to all of our Lore Archaeologist supporters. You guys help keep the channel running. And thank you to anyone who is joining our memberships. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, you should check out this one. It is about the Daedric Prince Azura and why anyone would choose to worship her.